Safety planning is a process. A safety plan is a description of what a survivor can do based on the current situations, the current circumstances they find themselves, tools that they can use to increase their safety. But safety plans also need to be flexible enough so that when an abusive partner's tactics change, that the plan itself changes. So that's another, just the reality of the safety planning process, I think calls to us to be very respectful of the role that a survivor needs to play in that process, and for us not to, again, swoop in and protect well-intentioned, but in ways that actually could increase the danger that that survivor is experiencing.
If the abuser is my adult child, you know, very few survivors are going to not want to have a relationship with their adult child. I think to assume that that's going to happen is, you know, is going to frustrate a whole lot of people and maybe put the survivor into additional danger. So really thinking about how that survivor can safely maybe visit with their adult child, you know, whether that's a public place. I'm always encouraging when I hear communities have visitation centers that they use for minor children and the perpetrating parent to be able to see each other. Would that be an option for communities to really think about? Maybe that would be an option for older survivors in their community too, to have safe visits with their adult children. So I think thinking around those issues, you know, or I want to see my grandchildren, how am I going to do that in a safe environment? I think mandatory reporting really we have to look at mandatory reporting when we're thinking about safety planning. You know, what's going to happen? Has a mandatory report been made? If a mandatory report has been made, what are the next steps? Is someone going to be talking to the perpetrator? How does the victim think the perpetrator is going to react to that? When are they going to be talking to the perpetrator? Do we want to get the victim out of the house or when they talk to that perpetrator? So really thinking about all the steps that are going to happen if a mandatory report is made. Is law enforcement going to be involved? And so I think that's another area where advocates really need to get strong on understanding the mandatory reporting system in their community. I also think when you're doing safety planning with older adults, you need to think about their any financial issues that are going on. So is there a power of attorney? Is the abuser's name on that power of attorney? Is the abuser the guardian? Is the abuser's name on the bank account? Has there been a reverse mortgage done? You know, really looking at some of those financial abuse issues that may be occurring and often occur in elder abuse situations. And then I also think you need to think about the caregiving needs of that survivor, whether the abuser is providing care for the victim or reverse, the victim is providing care for the abuser. You know, so really helping, because it can be a situation where the victim doesn't want to leave because who's going to take care of him if I go? So if you are very aware as an advocate of what kind of services might be available through the aging network, et cetera, in your community, you can possibly help the victim get additional services into the house so that that burden isn't quite so heavy on them. You know, I think the forms when we're doing safety planning are, you know, handing somebody a form and calling that safety planning is not safety planning. You know, having a conversation. I mean, if you need a form to kind of guide you through that process, that's great. But I think really paying attention that, and especially with the older survivors, I think this conversation, because cases get so complicated, that you really need to sit down, slow down, and it really is a conversation. If you want to take notes on that piece of paper or give them a form to take notes on, clearly you're going to want some sort of a record, something they can maybe walk out with. But I think it's very important that that form not drive the conversation, that conversation drives that form.
What would be best practice for advocates is to take an already existing safety plan and adapt it. And the reason I say that is because the context of elder abuse is different from abuse involving a 24-year-old or a 37-year-old. Just by its nature, it's different because someone has lived however many years of their life. just taking an already existing safety plan that is generally designed for the majority of victims, for example, of domestic violence, is not going to contain the kind of relevancy that's needed to really ensure that the tool is useful for the person that's going to be using it. So safety planning in and of itself that doesn't reflect the context of elder abuse and the kind of abuse that the person sitting with you developing that plan is experiencing is not useful. And the purpose is not to design a tool for the sake of designing a tool. It's a mechanism, it's a strategy so that that victim can feel safer.